Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to our pre-E3 coverage for E3 2018. Today we're going to be talking about Bethesda. If you're watching the video version, unfortunately we have no Dom and no Jordan this time around. The day of recording, some stuff came up for both of them, so they were unable to join us. I'll still be giving their predictions at the end of the podcast. They sent those in to me, but we don't have them. But luckily, I do have Logan. How's it going, Logan?
Hi, I am doing well. It's you and I again. It was one-on-one last time. It's one-on-one again this time.
It's meant to be. Yeah, it's meant to be. Logan Moore, if you're unfamiliar, writes at DualShockers, does a bunch of stuff on the internet. Used to podcast, doesn't so much anymore. You've heard him on the podcast before. You should know his name by now, be familiar with him. We're going to be talking about Bethesda. Going to be going into everything they have to show this year and some predictions at the end of what we think they might be showing. But this is interesting. So last year, they opened up with this very heartwarming video of family members of Bethesda employees talking about what their parents do for a living. I thought the editing was done really well. It was a nice tone setter for the rest of the evening, which is funny because it kind of is polar opposite of a lot of the crazy stuff we saw on stage. But there was quite a bit of complaints in terms of the length of the show, and that they didn't have enough to show in general, which is weird to me personally. I thought they had quite a lot of really cool games to show.
Yeah.
My only thing was, and this is a complaint that some people had, is why would you worry about doing a whole stage presentation at night and stuff like that if Pete Hines is only going to be out at the beginning of the conference and then not at all? But on the opposite end of that, people often argue that people come out on stage way too often. So I think maybe Bethesda heard a lot of those complaints from other conferences and was like, we'll just have Pete Hines go out there a couple of times and we'll just show video game. We're not sure what they have.
Well,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to speak to that from somebody who was there last year, because they had that whole like Bethesda Land thing that they were showing off. That was like the theme of last year. I was, come to an amusement park that's based off of the games that Bethesda publishes. As somebody who was there, the draw for that event was for the people who were there. That was hands down probably the single coolest thing I went to at all of E3 last year. That party was amazing. That party was better than the conference. So for me to leave there afterwards and then kind of like get the general consensus of the internet, like, oh, what did people think of this event? And for everybody to be like, that sucked, that was terrible. I was like, wow, what? I was surprised to see that response from the people at home. And then it kind of started to click like, oh, this was, I think the draw for that event last year was for the people who were actually in LA attending that event rather than the people at home. So I can see how it translated poorly to those at home, but I can promise you it was great in person.
I enjoyed their conference in general. We got the announcement of Evil Within 2 and a couple of other games. I thought it was fine. One beautiful thing that Bethesda does way more often than other publishers is that everything that was shown at last year's E3 came out within the last year. Mm-hmm. So let's get started with Bethesda. Always has a theme. You mentioned the theme park theme last year, and they actually had a whole thing for the media centered around that. Their theme this year, from what we've seen from the teaser videos, is like 3D papercraft type stuff. You have like these 2D papercraft characters in front of like backdrops. I wonder if we assume that's going to be the theme this year. Not too much to harp on there. I just figured I'd mention it. It seems like that's one of their things that they try to have that sets apart their conference from everybody else, is they have a theme going in. And the way we're going to start this podcast is talking about things that they announced last year that kind of lead into discussions this year. But first, I wanted to get Rage 2 right out the gate and talk about that, because they were planning on actually announcing this before E3 all along. Pete Hines has come out and said that. But unfortunately, due to the Walmart leaks, people found out about Rage 2 beforehand, so they had to kind of adjust their whole marketing for it. Had some fun with the leak at the expense of Walmart through social media. And yeah, Rage is an interesting franchise. I don't think anybody ever expected to get a Rage 2. I'm one of the people that played Rage. I enjoyed the game a lot. With id, you're going to get really solid gunplay. But I do think that Rage was id kind of pushing themselves to their limits in terms of game design. I think that game had a lot of problems in terms of structure and layout. For you being able to drive a car around, the world didn't seem big enough to like substantiate that mechanic in the game. But there were some cool parts about it. The action TV stuff was really cool, like the game show where you had to kill people. The enemy AI was really interesting, how it was very aggressive. The one thing with that game, though, that people like to harp on is it was so gray and brown. There was such a lack of color in that world, and that kind of took away from everything. And with Rage 2's announcement, there was nothing but color. And with that, it turned off a lot of people. It seems like
almost too much, yeah.
Yeah, the aesthetic of Rage 2 seems to have a way with people where they either love it or hate it, where it's very over the top chaos. And what I want to know from you, I guess, we'll get into some other questions about Rage 2, but do you think they open the show with it? We know about Rage 2. Do you think they just try to get that out of the way? Here's everything we want to tell you about Rage 2 at the top of the show.
I really don't think they're going to show that much of it, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah.
At the most, I think we just get a trailer for it, and I think that is going to be it. I don't think they're going to harp on that game for very long because, like you said at the top, the one common thing with Bethesda's showcase last year and the past couple years is that they focus on the games that are coming out this year in 2018. And currently, we do not know anything that is coming out in 2018. Obviously, Fallout 76 was revealed this past week. We would assume that's coming out later this year now. That'll be one of their big marquee fall titles. But we don't know anything else. Rage, we know, is 2019. And because of that, I would not be shocked to see them not really shine a large spotlight on that during this event.
Yeah.
Because they have plenty of time over the next 10 to 12 months until that game releases to continue showing people that game. So I really think it's going to have a small presence at the show. If it'll open the show, I don't know. But I think we just see a quick maybe 2-3 minute trailer for it at some point throughout the showcase.
Well, my counter argument to that, and I think it's something that's going to extend to the way we talk about their conference in general through the rest of this podcast, is though that's been awesome that everything they've announced at these conferences has been released in that same calendar year, I don't know if it's necessarily paid off for Bethesda. Wolfenstein 2 didn't really see the sales numbers that they wanted. It released in a really packed October 27th release date alongside Origins and Super Mario Odyssey. Dishonored, year after year, not year after year, but obviously entry after entry doesn't hit the sales numbers they want. Evil Within 2 is its own thing. It's a horror game, so you want to release that at the time they release it. That's not really, I think, affected by a lot of other properties that aren't horror. But I do think that maybe they have a change of philosophy slightly this year where we're at this weird, interesting area where we've seen a lot of their properties already release, and the ones we expect to see don't seem like the timing's right in terms of it being announced this year and releasing this year. So I don't know
potentially,
yeah. I think that there might be a subtle change in philosophy where we do see some games, maybe 2 or 3 that don't come out this year. And I think that maybe Bethesda they listen a lot to feedback, I think, which is really great. And I think that's why people kind of love Bethesda the way they do. And I think that they want to learn to skirt that line between, we want to show you a ton of stuff that's coming out soon because we want you to get excited about things you can actually buy. But I do think they understand that there is some greatness to be had in having some teases for the future. And I think it's skirting that line and figuring out how much of that you want to show. So I don't know. I do think we'll see some announcements that don't come out this year personally, but who knows? They might stick to the same track record, like you said, but we don't know anything. Even with last year, we knew Evil Within 2 was way more than likely, and Wolfenstein 2 was teased the year prior in that, the coding language.
And when we saw the new Colossus listed there.
Yeah.
As far as them coming in a little bit lower on sales, I actually talked to Pete Hines at PAX East this year, and I asked him about this exact thing. There's an interview somewhere on the internet, somewhere on DualShockers that you can go find this. Just search Pete Hines. I'm sure it'll come up. I asked him about that exact stuff, kind of like, hey, your guys' games seem to be coming, you're selling a little bit short on all of these games, and you're not making, I think, back what you expected or what you wanted for these games. Is that hurting your guys' line, or are you guys? Basically, I asked him, is Bethesda doing well? Because every Bethesda event I've ever been to is very large, and they are floating a hefty drink bill at all of these things.
That
and when
Skyrim
you see their games
money
come in a little bit. Yeah, they've got that Skyrim money and that Fallout money, and I think that is keeping them more than afloat. And Pete basically said the same thing to me, not about Skyrim and Fallout specifically, but he basically said, we're doing absolutely fine. There's nothing you need to worry about as far as Bethesda goes. He basically said something along the lines of how they really work with their developers, and they allow their developers to create the games they want them to create, And they kind of it's refreshing, and I think this is why so many people are committed to Bethesda and why so many people enjoy their games. Is that these titles that they put out are a little bit more niche, and they might not do the Call of Duty sales numbers or the Destinies or whatever games have been lighting the world on fire the past couple of years. But they find an audience, and I think that audience that they find is very passionate about those games. And I think it's almost better I think Pete Hines and the rest of Bethesda see that there is value in creating a very small, committed, it's not small, it's still millions upon millions of people, but there's value in creating a group of people that are insanely dedicated to your products that you put out, even if it is smaller than the Call of Duty bros or whatever.
Yeah.
There's still tons of value because I consider myself one of those people as well, because I freaking buy darn near every Bethesda published game because I think every game that they put out is of a certain quality, and I always find something enjoyable that they're putting out. So they're doing fine. I don't think that was the one thing he reaffirmed to me when I talked to him, is like, we are doing absolutely fine. I promise you don't have to worry about us for half a second, which of course could be PR speak, but no, I believe him. Like, I don't think Bethesda is hurting. And as you said, like, this year now they have a Fallout game coming out. That Fallout game is going to sell a lot of copies. Of course, Fallout 76 is rumored to be very different, which I'm sure we will touch on here in a minute.
Yes.
Yeah, but that is still a Fallout game.
Yep.
And even in the crowded fall landscape where we've got a Red Dead and a Call of Duty and a Battlefield and a Kingdom Hearts and a Smash Bros. And all Pokemon now, all this kind of stuff, Fallout is still going to find its audience because those who love Fallout are going to be there day one to play Fallout 76, like it or not. So I think they will. I think they're doing absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I think I didn't get my point across necessarily. Like, obviously, I don't think that the sales numbers for Wolfenstein 2 or Dishonored games and stuff like that is dire. But I guess what I was trying to say from that is maybe because of that, not that they need to sell more copies, but maybe they're more open to exploring the rest of the calendar. Because that's one thing that's weird with Bethesda is outside of like the Doom and Spring, they rarely explore any other part of the year outside of like the second half, like the fall, you know? So I would love to see if maybe they spread the releases out over the course of the year instead of having like 2 or 3 releases within 3 months. And I don't. Yeah,
the one game Hines mentioned specifically to me when I asked him about that was that he said a lot of people sleep on Elder Scrolls Online, and 2017 was that game's best year by far sales wise. So they've still got that game growing and bringing in them recurring cash every single year. So that was one he mentioned. Elder Scrolls Legends is another. I don't know what the state of that game is right now because I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but that game is switching development teams.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
I don't really know what's going on with that. But I think they have some. I think they have some continued revenue sources that sometimes we don't really think about, because I know I don't really think of ESO when I think of Bethesda off the top of my head sometimes.
No.
But that game is still growing. There's a new expansion coming out for it this week.
Yep.
So yeah, I think they're doing well. They're doing well for themselves.
So,
they know what they need to do to hit their margins, and I think they're doing that.
Exactly. So before we hop into those couple of Elder Scrolls titles that you previously mentioned, Bethesda VR was kind of a big thing. We heard about Fallout 4 VR and Skyrim VR last year. Doom VR, right? It was Doom VR and Skyrim VR.
Doom VFR and Skyrim VR, yes.
Yeah.
Or they had Fallout 4 VR too, but that's PC only right now.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah, but also Todd Howard came out and made this really weird statement with the Xbox One X where he said Fallout 4 VR works best on Xbox One X or something. He made some weird statement about Fallout 4 VR and Xbox, but like there's no VR system for Xbox.
Yeah.
It was very weird. Do you think they continued that? Because they even had like, they had a logo and it seemed like kind of a department for them is Bethesda VR. Could we see anything else from that? Do you think maybe, is there a chance that Fallout 76 launches with VR support? I don't see there's a world where that happens.
Yeah, I think them, along with many other developers and publishers in the industry right now, are going to continue in the VR space, trying to mine current IP that they have and flipping it into a VR game. I mean, that's what they've done with both Skyrim and Fallout 4 at this point.
Evil Within.
Doom VFR.
Evil Within
would be a good one. Yeah. Prey's got some horror elements to it as well. They could maybe do some interesting things with that. I don't know how. Out of all of their properties, I think Prey is the one that the least amount of people are hot on right now. But yeah, I see them continuing to go back to their well of current IP and maybe making a VR experience kind of game. I don't want to say experience because those end up typically being 30 minutes to an hour or something like that. Like Doom VFR was a full-fledged game. It was incredibly similar to actual Doom, but it was different. Like it had its own levels and it was its own experience. But if you had played Doom, like same weapons, same enemies, things like that. I see them going more along those lines still. I wouldn't expect them to come out and with a super original VR game that no one's ever really seen before. I don't know. As far as what they'll do, as far as like if VR games will have a presence at this show, it's hard to say. I'm kind of trying to gauge the VR market as a whole right now.
Because even PlayStation came out and said that it's below expectations, the market.
Well, yeah. It burned really bright for a year or two there, and then I think it's just kind of stalled since then because in PlayStation's case, they've said up front that they did not. PSVR sold incredibly high numbers, like way higher than they expected when it first came out. So much so that they didn't manufacture enough. And I think Andrew House talked about that when he was still leading PlayStation over there. Was that they way underestimated, and because of that, I think that kind of created a stall in the market. And I would assume at the same time they didn't put enough dollars behind developers to publish games for that platform at the same time. So now you've got lack of just on PSVR's case, you've got a lack of supply, and then you've got a lack of games that are potentially coming exclusively to that platform because they didn't necessarily fund those games because they didn't think there would be an audience for them there. And I think that's caused this strange stall in the market where I don't think people are uninterested in VR at this point. It's just it hasn't felt like the developers and publishers are really keeping up with it at the pace a lot of people who invested in the product wanted them to. So it's a really VR is a really strange thing. Like I own a headset myself and I really like it, but there is definitely a want for games on that platform still, in my opinion. And there's some cool developers out there doing some stuff. Servios has got Sprint Vector. They're coming out with the new Creed game, alongside the sequel of Creed later this year. I think there's like a boxing game. Sprint Vector's interesting as well. Polyarch with Moss, the little mouse game.
Insomniac recently announced VR.
Insomniac's got one coming out. Yeah, that could be really interesting. There's a lot of companies who are still doing interesting things. There's just it's not as diverse, and there's not as many of those unique titles as I think people want. And because I don't think people are doubting, like I was saying, I don't think people are doubting like VR as a concept and VR as what it is. It's more just like there's not a ton to do with it right now.
Yeah. Let's hop into Elder Scrolls Online. You briefly mentioned that a little while ago. So Elder Scrolls Online, like you said, is something that people don't often talk about, but it is a huge breadwinner for Bethesda. Makes a lot of money. Mm-hmm. They recently had the expansion announcement that's coming out on June 5th. I doubt we're going to see anything more than like, hey, Somerset's out, go play Elder Scrolls Online. But what they usually do for E3 alongside it is they usually have like a free play weekend for Xbox. I forgot what the one for PlayStation's specifically called, but for Xbox it's called Free Play Weekend. But they do it on PlayStation as well, where they let people try it out. They could potentially be a discount too to get into the game. I don't think we see a huge thing about it, but usually what happens every year is that they run a trailer for the new expansion. Last year is Morrowind. That's pretty much it. It's funny because the Elder Scrolls audience, I think a lot of them are worried that Elder Scrolls Online is going to replace Elder Scrolls indefinitely. There's no chance of that ever happening. I think that people just don't understand that they hit different audiences. Like, yes, there's people who love the mainline Elder Scrolls games that play Elder Scrolls Online, obviously. But this existing and being successful doesn't take away from Bethesda Game Studios working on the next mainline Elder Scrolls. Like, they know those are two different beasts.
Todd Howard has already said that they will one day make Elder Scrolls 6.
Exactly. I wouldn't even.
I think he said that last year. He said that will Bethesda Game Studios make Elder Scrolls 6? Yeah, absolutely. One day. Is that going to be soon? No, it's not going to be soon.
Yeah,
and that's just kind of where it's at. And
the best thing for Elder Scrolls Online is that it exists in that gap, right? That you have something like, if you are in that dire need of playing Elder Scrolls, play Elder Scrolls Online. Yes, it's not as, and I know people like to crap on Bethesda and say their games aren't polished or whatever, but Elder Scrolls Online is even a less polished Elder Scrolls because it has to make room for being able to have all these people play at the same time, and there are sacrifices that have to be made. But at its core, it is Elder Scrolls. It is an Elder Scrolls experience. So it's cool that it exists in the meantime. Todd Howard said that they're working on multiple projects, and we'll see 2 big projects before the next Elder Scrolls at the very least. And we'll talk about one of those potential big games in Fallout 76. So there's some stuff I want to talk about in terms of, is that wholly Bethesda Game Studios, because we know who's developing it now. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Elder Scrolls Legends. So I was actually a lot more optimistic going into this before the recent announcements. They had the expansion release on April 5th of House of Morrowind. I assumed that we were going to get into this and we were going to be talking about, well, what's their next big expansion? Last year was the Heroes of Skyrim. Now we have House of Morrowind coming out, what they were going to do. But recently we found out that they're actually switching development houses, and the previous developer is being exchanged for somebody else that can commit to it. And the way I read that PR statement, and let me know if you feel the same way, Logan, is that this change means one of 2 things. Either Elder Scrolls Legends is a bigger hit than they expected, so they needed a developer who's committed to making these very consistent changes to the game and keeping up with it, and the developer who was currently on it, that wasn't their importance to them. That's not the deal that they had struck with Bethesda, so they weren't as committed to keeping up with the game and making the changes players need, because in these online card games you need to keep up with it, right? You need to be close to the community, you need to be often balancing cards and doing things to get the community excited. So it's either Elder Scrolls Legends was more successful than they thought it was going to be, and the developer partnership they had just isn't going to work out for the path they have laid ahead of them, right? Or Elder Scrolls Legends was less successful than they expected, and the developer probably doesn't want to work on it anymore, doesn't want to be committed to it, so they need to find somebody in the scope of what they expect from Elder Scrolls Legends to continue working on it. You know, maybe the partnership wasn't paying off for Bethesda in terms of how big Legends was, so maybe they got a developer who, maybe not in terms of quality, but in terms of price point, is a better deal for Bethesda for what they're getting out of Legends. They made it clear they're keeping up with the content, they're going to be doing all this stuff. I don't think Legends is disappearing at all. But what side of that coin do you feel? Because I've played Legends, I think it's a great game, but the competitive card game place is a very tough market.
Yeah.
You have Hearthstone, which is huge. People don't often talk about the new Magic game that is very much inspired by Hearthstone. Magic Online Arena, I believe is what it's called. I actually got invited to the beta and I've played it, and it's very much inspired by Hearthstone. People often forget how big Magic the Gathering is. It's huge. So it's a very competitive space. I want to know from you, what do you think about this whole Legends shakeup? I think it's still going to continue in perpetuity, but what side of the coin do you think it fell on?
Man, I really don't know.
Yeah, it's tough.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah.
I agree that the card game market is definitely oversaturated. The fact that Artifact, the Dota card game, is lurking as well, which I think will absolutely find an audience. I think that's just going to continue to bury Elder Scrolls Legends. That's the thing. Elder Scrolls Legends is not a bad game. I obviously don't know any numbers off the top of my head about that game's player base or how much money they made off it or anything like that, and I don't even know if they've ever released those details. Yeah, I don't know. This could it's really hard to say with this, because there are the two possibilities you propose, but then there's different reasons for those possibilities. Like if the game is waning, like maybe they switch developers to just kind of slowly put the game to bed and kind of kill it off, or if it's doing incredibly well, maybe they're going to try to make it bigger, or maybe it's doing worse and they hired another developer to hopefully make it bigger and better. Like there is a lot of different possibilities here, and it's really hard to know at all. I agree. Simplest answer, Elder Scrolls Legends is not going anywhere in the short term. We'll see what the legs on it are.
I could see a console port though. I think that's something that could get a little bit more energy behind it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Gwent's out there as well. I forgot about Gwent now that we're thinking about more card games.
The thing I will say about Elder Scrolls Legends is that the single player campaign for it is, in my opinion, the best single player for any of these card games. I think Hearthstone's is pretty good. Obviously, it has Blizzard money behind it, so the quality's there, but the storytelling and stuff really isn't. Elder Scrolls Legends feels like an Elder Scrolls card game, if that makes sense. And like the story, you feel like you're playing an Elder Scrolls story that just so happens to be in a card game. And a lot of the story is based on you making decisions, like a Bethesda game. And a lot of times your decision rewards you with a certain card. So not only are you choosing what you feel is best for the story, you get a card that kind of mirrors that decision. I think it's really well done.
Yeah.
And my worry is, I don't know if it's going to be better off for this change or if it's going to be worse off for this change, but we'll see. It's a very tough thing to crack. We don't know because it's a market that's so weird, and to be able to sit here and talk about a game that we don't know if it's really successful and they're making the change or it's not doing very good, that's a very rare case, but it seems that way, and we'll find out in the coming months. And I think in the following year, like you said, if it's better for the long run, if it's here for the short term, we'll find out. Let's talk about Switch. Obviously, we saw the partnership with Switch last year with the Skyrim port. They got the Wolfenstein 2 announcement getting ported over. I want to know from you, do you think we're going to get another port announced? The likeliest scenario for me is Dishonored. Dishonored is a franchise that just hasn't seen a lot of love. They're one of those, like you mentioned earlier, one of those franchises that has a core community that loves them, but the quality of the game hasn't really matched its sales success. And I personally would love if they ported Dishonored to the Switch. I think it'd be really cool. Whether that's all three of them, that being Dishonored 1, 2, and Death of the Outsider, whether that's just the Game of the Year edition of Dishonored 1, which I can't remember the name of, Witches of Brigmore was the DLC, but that wasn't the name of the big package, right? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, I can't remember what the...
Yeah. But do you think we see a Switch port? And if so, do you think there's a possibility of Dishonored? Like, do you think we'll see a Switch port at all?
I mean, I think it makes sense to continue putting things on that platform. They like Switch. They've been happy with Switch so far. I know they're not seeing... Again, I don't think they're seeing drastic returns on Switch either.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think the games that make most sense on that would be last-gen games because... I think the investment to port some current-gen games over to Switch is just going to be too great for them, and in the end, I don't even know how well they're going to run. Like I played Wolfenstein 2 on Switch at PAX as well, and that did not seem that great.
That baby chugs.
And so, yeah, it did not. I played in handheld mode. It seemed better docked, which I know is usually the inverse in that situation, so that's kind of strange. But yeah, that game did not seem all that fantastic on the Switch. So yeah, I think it makes sense for them to potentially port a game from the previous console gen over. Dishonored would make a ton of sense. Yeah, I don't know. And then yeah, I don't know. There's some other games they could port as well. I know people have been talking about Fallout 3 a lot. At least they were before we found out that Fallout 76 was a thing. A lot of people thought Fallout 3 was coming over. I still think Fallout 3 makes sense to kind of come this current gen. But that's a different conversation we could have in a couple minutes, I guess.
Yeah. So I mentioned Dishonored. It obviously is a franchise that people love. Do you think there's a chance, we saw obviously Death of the Outsider last year, do you think there's a chance that they package all those together in like a collection and sell that? Because we're not going to see Dishonored for a while. They kind of said that it's going on hiatus. Arcane's probably going to be working on other stuff. Prey, obviously.
Yeah.
I
don't think so.
There's no chance?
No, I don't think so. If we see anything Arcane-wise at all, it will be Prey.
Yeah.
I think Dishonored is going to be quiet for a year or two here, and we'll see what happens with the future of that franchise.
So Quake Champions is interesting because obviously people have a fondness for Quake, has a lot of nostalgia for PC players. Quake Champions is their hero shooter. It's still in early access on PC, which is really odd. I just thought of some ideas of talking points. Do we think it'll finally come to consoles? Obviously, Quake is a game that doesn't translate that well to console because it's very fast-paced, and the mouse precision is a huge thing for Quake players. So I don't know if that's possible. And do we get a release date?
I don't think...
It's odd that it's still in early access. Very odd.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, we might get a quick trailer saying formal release date is this day. I think there's no possible way that game comes to consoles. Not in that form. And if they dumb it down for consoles, then that's just going to be a terrible product. That game cannot be played without running like 120 hertz, 60 frames a second. That game is, from the bottom up, it is optimized for high-end PCs. So I think there is absolutely no chance that comes to consoles, because then you would assume it's going to be either chugging, or there's going to be performance differences between premium consoles and non-premium consoles, and there would be a ton of issues with that, I think.
My guess is the reason they're still in early access is I think that the hero shooter is come and gone. The only one that's kind of still standing is Overwatch. And I think that team's probably just working on whatever the next Quake thing is. I think that Quake Champions, they thought was going to maybe hit the ground running and capture that zeitgeist of hero shooters. We're kind of past that already. And I just don't think that game can come out and be like uber successful. Obviously, it'll have its core fan base. But I just have thoughts that maybe the team is working on whatever that can evolve into that might have a bigger audience. Because I think the hero shooter thing was a flash in the pan, and they kind of got in on it late, which is weird. We saw what happened with Lawbreakers, unfortunately. We saw what happened with Battleborn. And yeah, I just think Quake Champions is in early access still because they're trying to readjust it to something that will have a little bit more market share. Wolfenstein 2 obviously came out last year. We have the Switch port coming out this year. We have DLC for the game that's come out. What I want to know from you is, do you think we'll see kind of like the Old Blood kind of thing that happened with the first Wolfenstein? Because we had New Order, and then we had Old Blood, which was DLC, but it was technically a standalone game. Like, you could buy Old Blood and play it without owning New Order. Do you think we see that with New Colossus? Do you think we see a standalone kind of thing? Because the way Old Blood worked is it was in the same engine. It was just like an extension of the story, obviously. Do you think we see that with Wolfenstein 2?
I do not. I think they have fleshed out the extra content that is coming to Wolfenstein 2 already through the DLC, the 3 or 4 of those separate DLC packages they've released. Plus, I think, I just don't think we're going to see anything else from this franchise until the third game inevitably arrives. I think it makes more sense for Machine Games to get hard at work on that, because I think everybody feels like that game is coming, and we gotta fight Mecha Hitler at some point in that series.
Well, the producer came out and said that the third game, they actually want to open it up more, which gets me excited, because 2 was definitely more open than 1. It was way not as linear. And if he wants to open it up even more, that gets me excited in terms of game design. So I would much rather have them working on Wolfenstein 3, but it is a possibility, I guess. So
I just don't know what you can do with an offshoot in that franchise. I mean, especially assuming you would still be playing as BJ as well, because that's the thing with the Old Blood, is at the end of the day you were still playing as BJ Blazkowicz there. I don't think they can really do anything else offshoot wise within like the realm of Wolfenstein 2's timeline with BJ, unless they're going to do some sort of like Ratchet and Clank Quest for Booty type thing, where it's a game that takes place in between 2 and 3 or something like that. That's the only way I could see that happening, and even then I don't know if that's the best idea. Yeah, they should just get to work on Wolfenstein 3.
Yeah. Evil Within 2, do we see DLC for that?
I think so. Yes. Like this game, on the other hand, like Wolfenstein 2, we got a lot of post-launch DLC like pretty quickly after that game came out. Evil Within 2 released and we've pretty much had no word on that game since then. So I think it makes sense for something to come from that, especially because there was multiple DLC packages for the first game, which all did kind of expanded on that game in an interesting way. And I think I think Evil Within 2 has a lot of people's interest in. That game hooked me more than the first one did, for sure. I would be totally down to return to that world and play some more Evil Within.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of teases for this Prey Moon DLC. It's pretty much a given at this point that we're going to be seeing it. They added the achievements on Steam that kind of spell out that we're going to the moon. There have been quite a lot of teases in social media. It's interesting. Prey, like a lot of the other Bethesda games we've talked about, didn't have crazy sales numbers. It didn't even really have crazy critical success. It was considered an average game by many, 7-ish for on a 10-point scale. I personally enjoyed it quite a bit. The Moon DLC has me intrigued. I don't think. I think it's a given that we're going to see it. I don't think it's going to take up a whole lot of the show. I think it's going to be a quick trailer, kind of just teasing you doing something related to the moon. I don't know how you feel on Prey. Would you be excited for a Moon DLC? Would that get you back into that game, or are you kind of done?
Yeah, I'd go back to Prey.
Yeah,
I liked Prey a lot. Like I think that's like maybe the most underrated game of 2017. Yeah, I would happily play more Prey if they released more content for that game. And yeah, like you said, I think that seems like of all of the mystery things that we don't know of yet for this conference that they have kind of kept under wraps, that is the one that is absolutely going to be happening, you would have to imagine.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It'd be weird if it was just like, I don't know what else it could be in terms of, because we know it's related to Prey, it's related to the moon, so I don't know what other thing it could be, but we'll see. Doom 2 is a thing that keeps getting thrown around by people. People expect to be seeing Doom 2 this year. Obviously, the Doom from id, I don't want to say the first Doom because that's not correct, but 2016's Doom came out, was stellar, was awesome, loved it, one of the best soundtracks in gaming, period. People think we're going to be seeing it after 2 years, Doom 2, the sequel, the follow-up. It's interesting. If it's in the same engine, I could totally see them turning around and getting that going. But are we expecting too quick of a turnaround? Like for this game to come out? Here's the thing I want to preface. This game won't come out this year. If this game is coming out, it'll be March 2019, I believe. I don't think that there's no way that this game comes at the end of this year, but it releasing March 2019, let's say, is that too soon for a follow-up?
I don't think it's too soon. No. I mean, that's 3 years? Yeah, that's 3 years. I think that's I think that's totally in the cards. What is my reservation more than anything at this point, because I was under the impression that we would definitely, maybe not definitely, but I thought it was a fair likelihood that we would see Doom 2 finally teased or shown off, revealed, whatever, at this conference. Now that we know id is working on Rage 2, I'm curious how much of their studio is committed to that project.
Like how much of Avalanche is also committed? Like how much does Avalanche have? Yeah.
Yeah, because I the way they've made it sound with Rage 2 so far is that Avalanche is more of the lead on that, and then id is kind of coming in and helping them polish up. Or no one's really said anything yet about this.
Well, we
assume.
So this
is more my inference is that they're coming in and helping them tighten up the game mechanics and stuff like that. The things that it is good for, the good shooting, the shooting that feels good, the things in a shooter that you can immediately recognize as, oh yeah, this is an id game.
Yeah.
Because Avalanche is obviously more of the open world studio developer, and id's known for their gameplay mechanics. So you would assume they're doing less work on that project than Avalanche is. Maybe that's a poor assumption. But if they aren't the lead on Rage 2, I think it's absolutely likely that their next game is Doom 2. As for if we see it teased here, I don't know, man. Like the Fallout 76, which I know we're going to talk about next now, that game being revealed has kind of thrown off my expectations for what they will be showing here. Because that was, I think if we would have had this podcast a week ago, I don't think any of us would have predicted anything Fallout related, correct?
Fallout 3 remaster, possibly. Because it's a 10-year anniversary.
That would have been.
But yeah.
Yeah, that would have been maybe it, and now we're getting a completely new Fallout game. So it's hard to say. I guess I'll end it on this. If there's anything I want to see at this conference, it's Doom 2.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be in there absolutely hoping and praying that game is revealed. Will it be? I don't know. I think it's honestly a coin flip.
My biggest thing is, I know we'll see it in the next 2 years. I definitely think that. Whether it's this year or not, I don't know. My biggest interest is, will it have multiplayer? That was like the big thing that weighed down the first Doom, is that multiplayer was not very good. I
think they just hack it off. I think they cut ties with it personally.
Yeah, because it actually partially worked on the multiplayer, but it was developed by other in-house studios, and I wonder if Bethesda at large, and maybe id too, were like, it wasn't really worth it. This will give, if we're not having to worry about that, it gives us more time to focus on the single player campaign and maybe post-release content, and those other studios can be freed up to help with other projects. I just don't know if it's beneficial, and I know it's blasphemous for people because, like, no, Doom needs to have multiplayer, but I don't know if it needs to anymore, honestly. I think that Doom, the first Doom, showcased that, like, it was a meaty single player game with a hell of a soundtrack, great, fast, fluid gameplay, and every time you talk to people, the one gripe people had was, yeah, but that multiplayer though, you know. And I just think that I could easily see it being cut off. Whether that happens or not, we'll see.
I think we're entering. I mean, for a few years there, we were in a weird age where it seemed like every game had to ship with multiplayer for some reason. Like, like every game in the late early 2000s or the late whatever that first
from like 2007 to like 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like every game was shipping with multiplayer, whether or not multiplayer was needed on it or not. Like, I mean, some easy examples would be like
Mass Effect.
Last of Us, which had good multiplayer. Mass Effect had good multiplayer. Last of Us had good multiplayer, but I don't think a lot of people expected that game to really need it.
Uncharted.
Another one off the top of my head, Uncharted would be another one that actually had some pretty solid multiplayer as well. But at the time, it was like, why are they doing this again? And then like BioShock 2 is the strangest one that I think a lot of people forget had multiplayer at one point.
The Tomb Raider multiplayer was kind of bad.
Tomb Raider had multiplayer as well.
Yeah.
Rise of the Tomb Raider still had it as well, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's very interesting. We'll see what happens. We're running a little long, so I kind of want to go. I want to talk about Fallout 76 for a good chunk, so that's why I want to get through that, and then we'll get through the rest of the stuff. So Fallout 76, we had the teaser by Bethesda on the day that Pokemon was unveiled, and they ended up announcing it the day after. Found out that it was Fallout 76. Interesting trailer. Due to some research, Fallout 76, the actual vault is in D.C., and it's near like the greater Ohio Valley, so like West Virginia, all that stuff. Obviously the DMV. We don't know much about it. There's rumors that it's a multiplayer game or has multiplayer features, heavily inspired by Rust and DayZ. We don't know if that's true. That's coming from Jason Schreier and a bunch of other sources. They seem to believe that it is true. Bethesda has been kind of quiet in terms of confirming or denying things. We actually we got some more leaks saying that it is a Fallout RPG, and that they are doubling down on rebuilding. Like the theme of this game is rebuilding, and that though there are some multiplayer aspects, that it will feel like a Fallout RPG, which is interesting given the name. Like it's not like new something or something like that. It's Fallout 76. Some other things that we know, it's being developed by Bethesda Game Studios Austin, which is formerly Battlecry Studios, but it's also being developed by main Bethesda Game Studios. That's a conversation I want to have. Let me get through the information first, and we'll double back on that. So like I said, Kotaku reports that it's an online game. One thing about Vault 76 is that it was a control vault, so unlike a lot of the more hysterical, funny, or interesting vaults, this one had no experiments going on. It was meant to open 20 years after the vault, the nuke. We know, thanks to on the Pip-Boy, it says October 21st, 2102, that it is going to be, we assume is going to be a prequel to any Fallout we've played before. This, in the timeline, it also takes place before mutants, super mutants were created. So it's a very interesting time in terms of Fallout lore. But the thing I want to touch on is, like with Avalanche and Rage, we don't know how much of Bethesda Game Studios Austin is steering this, because if it is more of an online-centered game and it isn't a full-fledged Fallout RPG, that kind of has me wondering how much the mainline Bethesda Game Studios is working on this game. Like, we know they have huge projects in place, and this is going to be something in terms of predictions and stuff. Like, there is a world where I can see that this being Bethesda Game Studios Austin's game, with mainline Bethesda Game Studios helping them, and we see a big reveal from what actual Bethesda Game Studios is working on. I don't think it's out of the ordinary to think that this isn't the big thing for Bethesda's conferences here. That being said, on the opposite side, I could totally see this being Bethesda's big thing, where it is another huge Fallout RPG that just so happens to have multiplayer, you know? That's the strangest thing, is that I could see this being a smaller title worked on by Bethesda Game Studios, or I could see it being the big blowout game for them. I don't know yet, you know, and that's the tough thing.
I'm in that same boat with you, and I didn't think it would be their big game. And then I don't know if you saw this either, but there are Fallout 76 billboards going up in LA right now on the Figueroa. I forget what the name of that hotel is out there in LA. But yeah, there's some giant. They've got one of the big advertisements out there in LA for the week, and that's Fallout 76. So I was like, okay. They're pouring a little bit extra money into that. I mean, Fallout is a more well-known IP. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about Starfield in a second, but assuming that game's real, then like putting up an ad for that's really not going to do much for people anyway.
Exactly.
So
that might not even be this year.
I agree.
You know, they might.
Yeah,
tease
then
it,
that
so.
might not even be this year. I agree. I think so. My hot take with this one, steering clear of too many predictions. Yeah, I think this is totally Bethesda Game Studios Austin. I think the only reason Bethesda Game Studios proper and Todd Howard are even tied to this
Fallout.
is because one, Fallout, yes, and because two, Todd Howard is like one of the 3 or 4 most recognizable game developers in the entire industry.
Yep.
So for him to ever be able to emerge and do a little bit of PR talking, any chance they can get for him to do that is probably good for that company and gets people excited just because he's such a recognizable face. Like, let's say at the end of that 24-hour stream they had, somebody else not Todd Howard would have appeared in front of the screen and been like, "Hi, I'm this guy from Bethesda Game Studios Austin. Here's Fallout 76." People would have been like, "What the heck is this knockoff?" But because Todd Howard is there, it's like, oh, it's Todd. It's our Lord Todd Howard, and he's here to show us a new Fallout game. This must be amazing. So yeah, my hot take is that they are Bethesda Game Studios proper is hardly involved with this at all. I'm sure they're helping manage it, and of course it's a Fallout game, so they're going to want to ensure that it is of a certain quality, so that Bethesda Game Studios Austin doesn't put out something that maybe damages the brand of that game. Or the brand of that IP.
And that's the Todd Howard thing. I think he is concerned not necessarily with helping them in holding their hands. I think he cares so much about the brands he's helped create and like make. Obviously, they didn't create Fallout; they purchased it. But like the things that they've brought into a new era, I think that's what he's worried about is the brand. And I think he's attached to it because they want to oversee like, okay, you're not screwing with the brand.
Well, and like it or not, like it is a Bethesda Game Studios product at the end of the day, and he is the figurehead for that studio.
Yep.
So even though it's a different remote office, it's not any different than with a bunch of remote offices, like with BioShock's development or something like that. There was like 3 or 4 different remote 2K studios that were working on that project. But at the end of the day, like Ken Levine's the guy who's going to come out and talk about BioShock, even if there's other people at different locations who are more heavily involved with certain aspects of that game, which isn't the case with BioShock, but still. Yeah, I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. The only gripe I have with the reveal is that they were already saying you can pre-order it, which is a little scummy considering we don't even know what the game is, but that's video games in 2018, I guess.
That's the industry. Yeah, that's
like
I don't understand why people have problems with pre-orders, especially like through Amazon, where you're literally not paying a dime until the game ships.
Yeah.
And the game usually ships 2 days before release. So if you don't cancel it by then, that's kind of on you in the first place. I don't know. It's just...
I don't think it's a huge issue. For me, it's just like, come on. Like, for me, it's like Bethesda. It's like, you didn't need to do that. I understand why you did it. Obviously, money. But I'm like, yeah, it's not a huge thing. It didn't like, oh, screw this or whatever. But yeah, it is what it is. I agree.
Well, the fact that pre-orders are live too probably means it's out this year for sure.
Yeah,
which they haven't confirmed yet. But
I'm with you. I don't think this is BGS proper. I think this is the Austin project. I think after Battlecry failed in the studio, I think that they're like, hey, work on this. And it's a good way for that team to make something that people will care about and kind of give them confidence again. Because I think Battlecry definitely hurt morale in some aspects. It had to have. So we'll see what happens there with Fallout 76. Very interesting. A couple other things I want to get to before we get to predictions because we're running a little bit long. Escalation Studios. So if you're not familiar, this is a development house that Bethesda purchased in 2017. They helped develop Doom, Rage, Team Fortress 2, Disney Infinity. They've worked on a lot of stuff. The last project they were involved in was launched in 2016, which was Doom. The thing I want to know from you is, this is a studio we could potentially see a new IP from. This is a studio that people aren't talking about. Escalation Studios is a experienced studio. Like I said, they haven't worked on anything since 2016. So if they purchased them in early 2017, that means that they'd have over a year of working on it. That being said, we don't know if Escalation was maybe working on something in partnership with Bethesda and then they just purchased them outright, because that can happen too, right? Where they had a partnership and then they actually bought the studio. Just a quick question. We don't have to go over it too much, but do you think there is a possibility that we see Escalation Studios unveil their game, whatever that is, or their project?
Possibility. Yeah. I mean, the one thing I think we know going into this is that Bethesda has a lot of tricks up their sleeve, and of all the conferences, I feel like, especially at third parties, like this is the one that is most secretive, that we really know absolutely nothing about, because before Fallout 76, Bethesda did not have a single game slated for the latter half of this year. So they have a lot of games up their sleeves. So yeah, I mean, with that in mind, like Escalation could easily be one of those games they have coming out later this year, or early next year, or something like that.
When we do research for this, I always like to look for the studios that we don't know what they're doing, because those are the studios, resources only go so far. So when we have another studio that they own that hasn't released anything since 2016, that gets the juices flowing in terms of hype, because that is a possibility. That is a logo we can see pop on screen with something we don't know about, right? It's an opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
The last thing I want to get to before we get into rapid fire questions and stuff like that is, so BGS proper, we talked about how me and you both believe the hot take that they are not they're not focused on Fallout 76. It's not their project. They're working on Starfield, if that is true, or obviously Elder Scrolls isn't coming out anytime soon, but I would guarantee it's at least in pre-pro. They're doing some concept art stuff. They're doing some of that stuff.
There are people doing concept art for Elder Scrolls 6 somewhere right now.
Exactly.
So.
I think my bet personally is the next Bethesda Games proper reveal we see is a new IP, and whether that's Starfield or not, that'd be awesome. If you're not familiar, Starfield is this rumored game. It's a sci-fi RPG space RPG that takes place in the same Bethesda universe that Fallout and Elder Scrolls do. There's rumors that it's an FPS. There's rumors that it has like base planets you can visit, but it also has some that are randomly generated and stuff like that. We know that they've renewed the trademark for years, since 2012. It's interesting if this exists. The reason I want to go back to what I was saying with Bethesda Game Studios releasing a new IP is I think the biggest gripe they've gotten in the last 5 or 6 years is that another Skyrim port, which is funny because I think people are just mad that the game keeps selling. And with Fallout 4, I thought Fallout 4 was a great game. By no means did I think that was the evolution of Bethesda Game Studios proper, and that's my biggest gripe with that game. I think it was very solid, very good. It wasn't the next evolution. I think Skyrim was easily the next evolution when it came out to what Elder Scrolls was from Oblivion. I don't think Fallout 4 did that for the Fallout franchise in relation to Fallout 3. And I think in order to get away from those, I think that Elder Scrolls will not hit until the next gen, in my opinion. And in the meantime, I think they want to introduce us and make us fall in love with another franchise. And I really do think that whether it's this year or not, the next Bethesda Game Studios proper announcement is a new IP, is a game we've not played a franchise entry in. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to get. I know a lot of people are hungry for Elder Scrolls 6, but I mean, I think it makes more sense, like, kind of with what you were saying there, for them to maybe create a new IP, because it's got to get that loop of Elder Scrolls Fallout, Elder Scrolls Fallout, Elder Scrolls Fallout has got to get tiring to say at some point. So yeah, I think that once they were in the back half of Fallout 4's production, they were easily starting pre-production on whatever I would assume that this new game is going to be. I do think, I strongly believe in my heart, and in my mind somewhat, that I do think it is very possible that we see a tease of their project. I don't know if it comes out this year, but I do think that with Fallout 76 being a game that maybe not a lot of people are sold in on, and I think that Bethesda understands that, like, Fallout 76, cool, we want it to be a success, it's going to be awesome. I do think that people are hungering for the next thing from Bethesda Game Studios proper, that I do think it will be the one more thing announcement, where after Todd Howard's done explaining Fallout 76 and why you should buy it, screen goes black, comes up, and we see a tease or a logo or something. I don't think it's Elder Scrolls. I'm not of that idea. I don't think we're going to see a tease of the next Elder Scrolls. I do think we're going to see a tease of the new IP. And I know that's strange for Bethesda, but I do think they're in this weird area now where Fallout 76, we don't know if it's going to be great or bad or what exactly it is. And I do think that they, in the same way that Nintendo announced, like, hey, these Let's Go games might not be what the core audience wants, that one's coming in 2019. I think they could possibly do this too, where it's like Fallout 76, awesome, great. If you're not really into that, here's a little tease to get you excited for the future. We'll see. I don't know. It's an idea. It's tough. Bethesda Game Studios is interesting because they have a lot of people and they're very talented and they can do a lot, and they have a lot of leeway with Bethesda Softworks because they just not to the extent of Rockstar and 2K, but Bethesda Game Studios has been very good to Bethesda Softworks in general in terms of revenue. They're the breadwinner of that company, hands down. So yeah, they can kind of take their time.
So we need to get to predictions. So before that, I want to go through rapid fire, yes or no's. If it's not a yes or no question, because I didn't really prepare it to be this, quick answer. Okay, Logan? First off,
'Kay.
do you think we see new acquisitions? Do you think we see an acquisition of a developer we didn't know Bethesda already owned?
No.
Okay. Is there going to be a new mobile game announced?
Yes.
Okay. Will Pete Hines curse on stage?
Yes.
Will we see a Nintendo partnership like we did with Rabbids? With Ubisoft, obviously.
No.
Okay.
No.
Will we see a Marvel partnership?
No.
Will we see a Fallout spin-off? 76, that one counts. Obviously, those were in before the announcement.
This was written before, yeah.
Outside of Fallout 76, is there another Fall 2018 game for Bethesda?
Yeah, absolutely.
Lastly, this is the craziest one that we didn't even touch on, Logan. I don't know if you heard about this.
Yeah.
There's
I've been reading about the Game of Thrones stuff.
no, not the Game of
Or
Thrones
something.
stuff.
I thought there was a Game of Thrones rumor.
There was that, but there's a rumor floating around that one of From Software's 3 projects is being published by Bethesda.
I don't think that's true.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say a no on that
so
one.
there's a lot of information pointing to it possibly being true. I wouldn't even have thrown this on there if I didn't think there was actually like tangible evidence. Massive grain of salt, but there is stuff that points to that. From Software isn't owned by Bandai Namco, so they don't have to worry about being, whatever.
They can do whatever they can go wherever they want.
So
Yeah,
just for the sake of yes or no, do you think that happens?
No,
Cool.
I do not.
Yes. Alrighty. I'm not saying yes that I think it'll happen. I'm just saying yes because we're done with that section of the podcast. Just clarifying.
Okay.
So let's get to the predictions. For me, my first prediction: Fallout 76 gets a November release date, and they'll announce you'll get a bonus for having a Fallout 4, for playing Fallout 4. For those of you who played Fallout 4, whatever, right? So that's my prediction. Yeah. November release date, Fallout 4 bonus. What's your first one?
Starfield's absolutely a real video game. Where there is smoke, there is fire. There's been way too much smoke around that game for there to not be a project. I think it is absolutely real. I think it is a space RPG, and I think they go deep on it. I don't think it's out this year. I think it is next year, but I think they've been upfront with saying this is their longest showcase by far that they have planned this year. So not only do I think Todd Howard is going to do a deep dive on showing off the systems and mechanics of Fallout 76, I expect him to immediately follow that up and do a deep dive on Starfield or whatever this new space RPG is that they have.
Awesome. Cool. So Jordan and Dom's predictions. Jordan's first prediction is he thinks we get the Doom 2 announcement. That's pretty much it. I think that's fine. It's not super expected, so I think that's a good enough prediction. He thinks we're going to see Doom 2. Dom's first prediction here is that we're going to see a Fallout 3 remaster announced, and they're also going to announce that it's also coming to Switch. So Fallout 3 remaster, and it's going to also come to Switch. That's his first prediction. My second prediction, we see at least 2 games that don't come out in 2018. I'll clarify. We see 2 games that don't have release dates. So we'll see 2 games that don't even have a release window. That's my second prediction. What about you?
I'm going to hone in on kind of what we were touching on earlier with The Evil Within and say that it will absolutely be standalone DLC for that game later this year, and the storyline will pick up with I forget the main character in that game's name. I don't know if you know.
Not off the top of my head.
I don't know if you finished that game either, but they kind of dropped some hints towards the end that like his detective partner from the first game is still alive after you think he's dead, and I think this standalone DLC will involve him going after to find his former partner.
Ooh, interesting. Okay. Does that release in October?
Yeah, because it's spooky stuff. Yeah.
Okay, Jordan and Dom's second predictions. Jordan's second prediction, he believes that we'll see a new IP announced. He does include Starfield in it, and I'll let him have that because it hasn't officially been announced, so it would be a new IP. Mm-hmm. So yeah, he thinks a new IP will be announced. Dom's second prediction here, let's see here. Let's see. I'm just trying to make sure that we don't copy something we've already said.
Yeah.
Okay, so his second prediction, Fallout 76 gets a release date announced September 21st, which is my birthday, which I'm stoked because the Spyro Remaster is coming out on my birthday, which is really cool. Yeah, so he thinks it's coming out September 21st. No Switch version, which I don't think is that tough of a prediction. He also throws in a little caveat that Todd Howard will be on stage, and it'll get memed afterwards. It'll be all over the internet. That doesn't obviously count towards a prediction, but just a little caveat there. My final prediction. I think my other two are decent. I wanted to throw in one that's like completely bonkers that very highly unlikely, but I would lose my mind if it happened. I mentioned it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I subtly teased it. I say we get a Marvel partnership. I say that Bethesda gets on that track and they pitched something to Marvel, because that's how Marvel games works, is they're not going out and going to all these studios. They're actually just listening to pitches from people. And if they feel that they're doing the property justice, that's how Square Enix got Avengers and Guardians. That's how Insomniac got Spider-Man. There was actually some leaks that apparently another Sony studio is pitching to Marvel in the next month about a game, which is really interesting. But yeah, my third prediction is that we see a Marvel partnership between Bethesda and Marvel. Will it happen? 99% no. But there's a 1% in me that really believes that there's a possibility. What's your last prediction?
So this is kind of a weird one, I guess, but I'll go with it. Elder Scrolls 6 is mentioned.
Ooh.
But
okay.
Nothing is shown for it. And when I say mentioned, what I have in mind is Todd Howard saying something along the lines of, after revealing Starfield, to be like, yes, and we will be working on Elder Scrolls 6 one day, but instead this is what we have decided to make now, and I hope you guys all enjoy it, blah, 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 blah.
He mentioned it in speech, but there's not like an actual visual.
It's no visual, no formal announcement. It is just Todd Howard
Offhand.
speaking the words Elder Scrolls 6.
Got it.
Somebody will mention Elder Scrolls 6 in this press conference, but it will not be a reveal of any sorts or anything.
I would love if there was like a comedy bit in the middle of it, and I don't think it'd work well for audiences, but I'd love if like Todd Howard finishes like the Starfield thing, and like Pete Hines just comes out from backstage like, what the hell, Todd? No Elder Scrolls 6? And then the show just cuts to black. It'd be hilarious. It would never happen, but it'd be funny. Jordan and Dom's final predictions. Jordan says that we will get the Prey DLC. Not only will it be DLC, he says it'll be standalone, kind of like with New Blood. And he also says that it'll have a vibe like Blood Dragon. So it's going to be a little bit more on the wacky side, not so much the horror side. They're turning that wacky dial up to 11. Dom's final prediction. Let's see here. Okay, I'll do this one because this is a very spicy one. It's really funny. Maybe not funny to me. Dom predicts that we'll see an announcement of a Wolfenstein mobile game.
Interesting.
Very out there.
I mean, I would play that.
I would play that too.
I would shoot Nazis while I poop.
Exactly.
So yeah.
Shoot Nazis while I poop. The Logan Moore story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much it for predictions. Thank you guys for listening. We have we're covering all 6 press conferences this week, so definitely listen to them if you get a chance. We had guests on all of them. Thank you, Logan, for joining us. If you can, let people know where they can find you on the internet.
You can find me on the internet. I am at Moreman12 on Twitter. And then if you want to follow everything E3-wise that I will be doing, because I will be, like I said, out there in LA covering all this stuff, check out DualShockers.com during the week of E3 and in the subsequent weeks. We will have a lot of fantastic preview coverage going up for not only Bethesda, but everybody else at the show. It's going to be a good time, so make sure to check out DualShockers.
Yeah, definitely check it out. Logan does a lot of cool stuff. The fact that you got to interview Pete Hines is really cool, and I was really excited when you were like, I want to do the Bethesda one. So I was like, hell yeah. Yeah, you've joined us, I think.
Yeah, they're one of my favorites for sure, so I really enjoy talking.
You joined us last year. I don't know if you joined us the year before. I don't remember. I can't
remember.
Yeah.
Maybe it's been 3 straight years. I can't remember at this point.
Anyways, you'll probably be back next year, so look forward to that. And if you don't like Logan, too bad. I choose who's on, not you. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully Bethesda shows us some really cool stuff. I really want to see Starfield. I really want to see Elder Scrolls. But who knows? We'll see what happens. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye.